Have you noticed an interesting development, especially over the last 30 or 40 years? There's been a gradual weakening of the conviction of sin in people's lives. I think especially since television has come into homes and all kinds of things are now acceptable to Christians that once upon a time they would have said, no way. I was in the home of one of our believers this week. I was up in British Columbia and I was staying with these people, and in their home they had a pile of videos, and I wasn't snooping around. I just happened to be in the living room sitting in a chair next to the table where these videos were stacked. And the video on top, and there's young children in this home, and the video on top of the pile caught my attention. Once the wife recognised that I had actually laid eyes on this, she quickly swooped up all these videos and put them out of sight, but the damage was done. And the one on top of the pile was the Harry Potter videos. And I said to her, you know, I apologise, I wasn't snooping, I was just sitting there, and I happened to see the video on the top of the pile, and I'm looking at the young children in this house. And I'm saying to myself, how can an intelligent Christian Seventh-day Adventist couple deliberately show videos like this to their own children? I said, surely you know, and I didn't know this, but I stood in a bookstore one day because people kept saying to me, have you read the Harry Potter series? I said, no, I've got no intention of reading it. Oh, well, it's this and this. And so I said, I'd better read some of it. So I stood in a bookstore one day and I read several chapters of the Harry Potter story. And I said, oh, this kid's in a school for wizards. He's learning all the techniques of witchcraft and wizardry. Why would I feed it to my children? So I confronted this couple in love. And we had a beautiful time, and I led them to repentance over this. I said, the time in which we are living, it's tough enough as it is to raise kids. Especially kids that have a moral and ethical compass and a degree of purity, because there's so many images flashing to kids today. And I said, and this is especially focused on demonology and wizardry. So they immediately took it out on my urging, and they had a little fire and burnt it.
Oh, praise God.
I mean, that was positive, but I was shocked. I was really shocked because of the lack of sense of discrimination. They didn't have the wisdom to realise that this was exceptionally unhealthy. You know what I'm saying, don't you? These influences are everywhere. I've got a big family myself. Some of you know that I've taken 5 extra sons onto myself. So my family has grown from 3 to 8 now. And what a challenge to raise 5 young men today to the glory of God. So I've kind of got 2 families, an older family and 5 more that are all in college now at that level, you know. And just the thrill and excitement of seeing them. One of them was here, by the way, this week, but he went home yesterday. But the challenge of raising them so that their minds are fixed on Christ and that they have a purity of mind, not buying into everything that the world is dishing out to them. I hope I'm provoking you to thought on this because of the seriousness of the age in which we are living. This is the time for the forsaking of sin. And from my experience, sin has become so palatable that at times it's hard for even God's people to recognise it as sin anymore. Oh, that's okay, it's harmless, you know. Amen. It's not harmless.
Amen. We don't hear that from the pulpit anymore.
We need to hear this because the Day of Atonement is the time for the blotting out of sins. And I'm going to say it again, I quoted to you from Great Controversy this morning, that the only sins that are able to be blotted out by God are sins that have been confessed, repented of, and forsaken. forsaken. Please pray, by the way, for my homeland, Australia, because the worldliness today of the church in Australia is just scary to me. I'm about to go to Australia in 3 weeks' time, and God has forbidden me to have a seminar there for the past 25 years, but I have accepted one this year, and I need great wisdom
We will pray for you.
to be able to teach without tremendous opposition in Australia. But the last time I was there, just a couple of years ago, I was getting ready to preach in a church in Melbourne, my home city, and I know this church, and I know most of the people in this church. My sister's gone to this church for years, and I was just standing up the front of the church, and just for fun I started counting the number of couples that are living together but not married. And one or the other of them is married to somebody else. I got up to 15 couples and I ran out of time. And I said to myself, this, we can have this happen in California, we all know that. But this is like an epidemic. It's like an epidemic. And people say to me, well, this is just the way we do things in Australia. We don't believe in marriage anymore. And I said, but what about God's way? Anyway, my sister had the whole singles group come round to her house for Sabbath lunch. There were like 40 or 50 of them. And I know most of these guys. We had a great lunch together, and they all said to me, you're going to join us for our Sabbath afternoon activity, aren't you? I said, well, this is Australia. I probably should find out, first of all, what you're all doing. Oh, they said, it's nothing, it's fun. You'll just enjoy yourself. Just come. I said, well, I'm not the kind of person who just blindly accepts an invitation like that. So if you can't tell me what you're doing, it just raises my suspicions, Why are you reluctant to tell me? Oh, they said, okay, we'll share it with you. I said, I should hope so. They said, well, every Sabbath afternoon we all go downtown to the casino.
You have to be kidding.
No, I'm not kidding. I said, well, okay. And they said, you will come, won't you?
What do they do there?
Well, that's what I'm saying to myself. Well, they said, before you judge us, this was the funny part, before you judge us, which I wasn't planning to do, but before you judge us, we want you to know that we don't gamble until after the sun has set. Oh, I said, I'm feeling so much better upon hearing that, So what do? Oh, they said, we go to the discos and the bars, they all drink, So you will come? I said, I used to live in Las Vegas. There's nothing you can tell me about casinos that I don't know. And it's the last place on earth I'd like to spend Sabbath afternoon or any afternoon. So I didn't go with them, and off they went for their Sabbath afternoon activity.
No qualms.
And I felt so sad. Because, we are living in the time of probation. It's a time where we are to be forsaking sin, but apparently the world that I left has now become the church. That's what I said to myself. This is exactly the world that I left to come into the church, and today they're one and the same thing. We're living in dangerous times, in other words, because there's been a blunting of our sensibilities, even a loss of discrimination as to what constitutes sin anymore. Do you agree with that?
Yes.
I'm running into it every day of my life, and I don't want to harp on this.
But you should.
I'll play my harp, okay?